There is a particular kind of silence that exists in a swamp. Though silence may not be the right word, it is a place filled with sounds, yet somehow quieter than many landscapes that appear empty. The distant call of a bird drifts across dark water. Insects hum invisibly among reeds and grasses. Somewhere beneath the surface, a fish disturbs the water with a movement so subtle it leaves only a spreading ring. The air itself seems heavier, slower, carrying every sound with unusual patience. For centuries, swamps have occupied a strange position in the human imagination. They have often been described as mysterious, dangerous, and difficult to understand. Travelers avoided them, settlers drained them. Ancient stories filled them with monsters and spirits, yet the deeper scientists have studied these landscapes, the more remarkable they have become. What once appeared to be wasteland has gradually revealed itself as one of the most important and complex environments on Earth. A swamp is neither entirely land nor entirely water. It exists in a state between categories, occupying a boundary that challenges simple definitions. Trees rise directly from flooded soil. Water flows through forests. Roots disappear beneath dark surfaces stained by centuries of decaying leaves and organic matter. Unlike lakes, swamps are crowded with vegetation. Unlike forests, they remain shaped by water. This combination creates ecosystems unlike almost any other. In the southeastern United States, vast cypress swamps stretch across lowlands where seasonal floods transform the landscape. In colder regions, wooded wetlands form around slow rivers and shallow basins. Across the world, swamps appear in countless forms, each shaped by climate, geology, and time. Yet all share a common quality. They are places of transition where boundaries soften and separate worlds overlap. Human minds often find such places unsettling because we prefer certainty. We like clear distinctions between land and water, between solid ground and shifting surfaces. Swamps quietly ignore those preferences. The water itself tells part of the story. To an observer standing at the edge of a swamp, it may seem dark, even black. This appearance has inspired generations of myths, but the explanation is surprisingly simple. Leaves, bark, roots, and other plant materials slowly release compounds known as tannins as they decompose. These substances tint the water much as tea leaves color hot water in a cup. The resulting darkness can create the illusion of tremendous depth even when the water is relatively shallow. Sunlight struggles to penetrate far beneath the surface, producing an environment filled with shadows and hidden movement. Psychologists have long observed that human beings are naturally drawn to mysteries that conceal information. We pay attention when we cannot see clearly. The dark water of a swamp activates this ancient tendency. Our brains search for patterns, imagining possibilities beneath the surface. Yet most of what lies hidden is not threatening. It is simply life proceeding according to rhythms that began long before human beings arrived. One of the most extraordinary facts about swamps is that they function as living archives of time. Every year, leaves fall into the water, branches break, plants die. In many wetlands, oxygen levels remain low beneath the surface, slowing decomposition dramatically. Material that would quickly disappear elsewhere can remain preserved for centuries or even millennia. Layers accumulate gradually, creating natural records of environmental history. Scientists studying ancient pollen trapped within swamp sediments can reconstruct forests that vanished thousands of years ago. Tiny grains preserved in mud reveal changes in climate, rainfall, and vegetation across immense spans of time. In some regions, artifacts left by human societies have also survived in wetland environments with remarkable clarity. Wooden tools, woven materials, and traces of daily life sometimes emerge from swampy ground after centuries of concealment. These discoveries remind us that landscapes possess memories of their own. The Earth records events continuously, even when nobody is watching. The trees that inhabit swamps have evolved solutions to challenges that would overwhelm many other plants. Waterlogged soil often contains little oxygen, making it difficult for roots to breathe. Yet species such as bald cypress have adapted with remarkable ingenuity, Their roots produce unusual structures that rise above the water's surface like wooden spires. Known as knees, these formations remain somewhat mysterious even today. Scientists continue to debate their precise functions, though they likely assist with stability and gas exchange. Walking through a cypress swamp can feel like entering an ancient world. Massive trunks emerge from still water. Moss hangs from branches in long grey curtains. Reflections blur the distinction between sky and earth. The scene appears timeless, but every detail reflects millions of years of evolutionary experimentation. Nature rarely solves problems quickly. Instead, it works through countless generations, refining solutions with extraordinary patience. This patience extends far beyond individual species. Entire swamp ecosystems operate according to timescales that often escape human notice. A flood arrives and slowly retreats. Sediment settles. New plants establish themselves. Old trees fall and become habitats for insects, fungi, and microorganisms. Decades pass. Centuries pass. Gradually, the landscape changes shape. In modern society, many people experience time as a sequence of deadlines, notifications, and rapidly changing information. Swamps offer a different perspective. Their transformations occur so slowly that a single human lifetime may capture only a small fragment of the larger process. Standing beside a quiet wetland, it becomes easier to appreciate how brief our own experience truly is. This realization need not feel unsettling. Instead, it can produce a curious sense of relief. The world is larger than our schedules, older than our concerns, and constantly engaged in processes that continue regardless of our awareness. Perhaps nowhere is this more evident than beneath the surface itself, where vast communities of organisms perform work that sustains entire ecosystems. Invisible bacteria break down organic material. Microscopic creatures drift through the water. Networks of fungi spread through submerged soil. Together, these organisms participate in cycles of transformation that convert death into new life. A fallen leaf becomes nutrients. Nutrients support plants. Plants feed animals. The cycle continues endlessly, hidden beneath the stillness that human observers often mistake for inactivity. In reality, a swamp is among the busiest places on Earth, a landscape where countless forms of life interact every second. Yet from a distance, it appears calm enough to be asleep, and it is within that quiet contradiction that the deeper mystery of swamps begins to emerge. The appearance of stillness can be deceptive in many parts of nature, but few environments demonstrate this more elegantly than a swamp at night. As daylight fades and shadows lengthen across the water, an entirely different community begins to awaken. Frogs emerge from hidden shelters and fill the darkness with layered choruses. Insects trace invisible routes through humid air. Fish patrol submerged pathways beneath floating vegetation. Predators move carefully through reeds and along muddy banks, guided by senses that function far beyond the limits of human perception. To a listener standing quietly beneath the trees, the sounds may seem chaotic at first, yet careful attention reveals patterns. Certain calls repeat at regular intervals. Others answer from distant locations. The swamp becomes an enormous biological conversation, a network of signals exchanged among creatures that may never actually see one another. Modern science increasingly views ecosystems not merely as collections of species, but as systems of communication. Information moves constantly through sound, scent, movement, and chemistry. The nighttime swamp offers one of the most vivid examples of this hidden exchange, transforming darkness into a landscape rich with messages. Among the most fascinating participants in these conversations are the birds that depend on wetlands for survival. Many species use swamps as nesting grounds, feeding areas, or temporary refuges during long migrations. Some travel thousands of miles across continents, navigating with remarkable precision. They arrive at familiar wetlands that may have supported generations of their ancestors before them. The mechanisms behind such navigation remain one of nature's enduring wonders. Birds appear capable of sensing features of Earth's magnetic field, reading environmental cues, and combining multiple sources of information into journeys of astonishing accuracy. From above, a swamp may resemble a patchwork of water channels, forests, and vegetation. To migrating birds, however, it becomes part of a vast network connecting distant regions of the planet. Wetlands serve as resting points within global ecological systems, linking environments that may seem unrelated from a human perspective. A quiet swamp in one state can influence the survival of species that spend much of their lives thousands of miles away. The relationship between swamps and water extends far beyond their visible boundaries. Although they often appear isolated, wetlands function as regulators within much larger hydrological systems. During periods of heavy rainfall, they absorb and store enormous quantities of water, reducing the intensity of floods that might otherwise affect nearby communities. During drier periods, they release water gradually, helping maintain stability within surrounding ecosystems. This ability has earned wetlands comparisons to natural sponges, though the reality is even more sophisticated. Layers of soil, vegetation, and organic matter interact in ways that influence water movement with extraordinary complexity. For centuries, many societies underestimated these functions. Swamps were frequently drained to create farmland or facilitate development. Only later did researchers begin documenting the ecological services that disappeared along with the wetlands themselves. The lesson emerged slowly but clearly. Some landscapes perform essential work precisely because they appear wild and unmanaged. Their value does not always announce itself immediately. This tendency to overlook hidden value is not limited to environmental history. Human psychology often struggles to appreciate processes that operate quietly in the background. We naturally notice dramatic events, storms, fires, rapid change. Gradual influences receive less attention even when they shape outcomes more profoundly. Swamps embody this principle in physical form. Their influence accumulates over long periods through subtle interactions rather than spectacular displays. Carbon is stored in wetland soils. Water is filtered as it moves through vegetation. Habitats are created for countless organisms. None of these processes appear particularly dramatic in isolation, yet together they contribute to the stability of entire regions. The swamp reminds us that significance and visibility are not always the same thing. Some of the most important forces in the world operate with remarkable quietness. The carbon stored within wetlands represents one of their most extraordinary scientific characteristics. Plants absorb carbon dioxide from the atmosphere through photosynthesis, incorporating carbon into leaves, roots, and stems. When these plants die, much of that material enters waterlogged soils where decomposition proceeds slowly. Over centuries, immense quantities of carbon become locked away beneath the surface. In some wetlands, these deposits have accumulated for thousands of years. Researchers now recognize wetlands as critical components of Earth's carbon cycle, influencing global climate in ways that were poorly understood only a few decades ago. What appears from above as a tranquil landscape of water and trees may in fact be participating in planetary-scale processes. This realization highlights a recurring theme in ecological science. The closer we examine nature, the more interconnected everything becomes. Boundaries that once seemed obvious begin to dissolve. Perhaps this is one reason swamps have inspired so many stories throughout human history. People often sense complexity before they fully understand it. Long before scientists measured carbon storage or mapped ecological networks, communities recognized that wetlands possessed a distinctive character. Folklore from many cultures populated swamps with mysterious beings, hidden treasures, and supernatural encounters. Such stories reflected more than simple fear. They emerged from encounters with environments that resisted easy interpretation. Mist drifted across water, unfamiliar sounds echoed through darkness. Paths disappeared beneath seasonal floods. Landmarks changed unexpectedly. In landscapes where certainty becomes difficult, imagination naturally fills the gaps. Even today, despite centuries of scientific investigation, a walk through a remote swamp can evoke some of the same feelings experienced by earlier generations. Knowledge explains many mysteries, but it does not eliminate wonder. If anything, deeper understanding often reveals additional layers of complexity waiting beyond the edge of current understanding. Few sites illustrate this better than morning fog rising from wetland waters. As cooler air interacts with relatively warm surfaces, Delicate veils of mist form and drift among trees. Sunlight gradually penetrates the haze, illuminating suspended droplets that seem almost weightless. Such scenes often feel dreamlike because they challenge the visual cues our brains use to interpret space. Distances become uncertain, shapes emerge slowly, reflections blend with reality. Neuroscientists studying perception have shown that the brain constantly constructs models of the world using incomplete information. When familiar cues become ambiguous, perception grows more tentative. A fog-covered swamp gently exposes this process. The landscape becomes a reminder that seeing is not merely receiving information, but actively interpreting it. Much of what we experience as reality depends upon assumptions assembled quietly within the mind. As the fog eventually dissolves and sunlight spreads across the water, another day begins within the wetland. Turtles climb partially submerged logs to absorb warmth. Dragonflies patrol the air above channels and pools. Beneath floating leaves, fish navigate intricate environments shaped by roots, shadows, and shifting currents. Every species occupies its own perspective, experiencing the swamp according to sensory worlds often very different from our own. The more scientists explore these diverse ways of perceiving reality, the more extraordinary life appears. A dragonfly interprets motion with astonishing speed. A fish detects subtle vibrations moving through water. A bird perceives navigational information hidden within Earth's magnetic field. The swamp is not one world, but many overlapping worlds existing simultaneously, each inhabited by creatures whose experiences remain largely inaccessible to one another. And perhaps it is here, among these countless unseen perspectives, that another deeper layer of the swamp's story quietly begins to unfold. The existence of these overlapping worlds becomes especially apparent when attention turns toward the creatures that spend most of their lives hidden from view. Beneath the water's surface, among tangled roots and layers of decomposing leaves, countless organisms navigate an environment that humans rarely witness directly. Small crustaceans sift through organic debris. Aquatic insects pass through complex life cycles that may carry them from water to air and back again. Tiny fish seek shelter in submerged vegetation, while larger predators move patiently through darker channels. What appears from above as a relatively uniform body of water is, in reality, a highly structured landscape filled with pathways, territories, feeding grounds, and shelters. Ecologists sometimes compare such environments to underwater forests. Just as trees create layers of habitat above ground, submerged roots and aquatic plants generate vertical complexity beneath the surface. Every additional surface becomes an opportunity for life. Microorganisms colonize it. Invertebrates feed upon those microorganisms. Larger animals arrive to feed upon them in turn. Entire food webs emerge from structures that may seem insignificant to casual observation. This hidden complexity helps explain why swamps support such remarkable biodiversity. Life thrives wherever resources, shelter, and stability intersect, and wetlands often provide all three. Nutrients carried by rivers accumulate within floodplains. Seasonal changes create varied conditions that different species can exploit. Water offers protection from certain threats while introducing new opportunities. The result is a landscape capable of supporting extraordinary numbers of organisms. A single wetland may contain hundreds of species interacting through relationships so intricate that scientists continue discovering new connections even in well-studied regions. These interactions rarely resemble the simple chains often depicted in textbooks. Instead, they form vast networks where changes affecting one species can influence many others through unexpected pathways. The swamp teaches an important lesson about nature. Ecosystems are not collections of separate parts but living systems whose components continuously shape one another. One of the most visible examples of this interconnectedness appears whenever a tree falls. In many environments, a fallen tree might seem like an ending, a symbol of decline or loss. Within a swamp, however, such an event often marks the beginning of an entirely new chapter. The trunk becomes a habitat. Fungi begin breaking down wood fibers. Insects arrive to feed and reproduce. Birds search for prey among the bark. mosses and small plants establish themselves on newly available surfaces. Over time, the decaying tree gradually returns nutrients to the ecosystem while simultaneously supporting generations of life. Ecologists sometimes refer to fallen logs as nurse logs because they create conditions that help new plants grow. The image carries a subtle philosophical resonance. What appears to be an ending from one perspective may serve as a beginning from another. Nature rarely wastes opportunities. Transformation is often more common than disappearance. This constant transformation is particularly evident in the soil itself. Swamp soils differ significantly from those found in many forests or grasslands because they develop under conditions shaped by persistent moisture. Organic material accumulates gradually, creating dark layers rich in carbon and nutrients. In some wetlands, these deposits become so thick that they form peat, a substance composed of partially decomposed plant material. Peatlands represent some of the most effective long-term carbon storage systems on Earth, preserving organic matter across thousands of years. Walking across such ground can feel unusual. The surface may appear solid while remaining surprisingly soft underfoot. Each step compresses material formed through countless seasons of growth and decay. Beneath the present lies a physical archive of the past, layer upon layer recording environmental history. In a sense, every swamp contains a memory extending far beyond any individual organism living there today. The concept of memory appears repeatedly throughout the natural world, though not always in ways humans immediately recognize. Trees preserve information within growth rings. Ice sheets record ancient atmospheres. Sedimentary rocks document vanished oceans. Swamps contribute their own chapters to this planetary archive. Scientists studying wetland sediments often recover evidence of long-forgotten droughts, floods, volcanic eruptions, and shifts in vegetation. Tiny fragments preserved within mud reveal stories spanning centuries or millennia. Such discoveries can produce a curious shift in perspective. Human history often feels immense when viewed through the lens of individual experience, yet many wetlands have witnessed environmental changes unfolding across timescales that dwarf recorded civilization. Long before cities rose and fell, water continued moving through channels, plants continued growing and decaying, and ecosystems continued adapting to changing conditions. The swamp becomes a reminder that Earth's story extends far beyond the boundaries of human memory. Despite this vast timescale, wetlands remain surprisingly sensitive to present conditions. Small changes in water levels can influence plant communities. Alterations in temperature may affect breeding cycles and migration patterns. Because swamps exist at the intersection of land and water, they often respond quickly to environmental shifts. Scientists therefore view wetlands as valuable indicators of broader ecological trends. Observing changes within these systems can provide insights into processes occurring across larger regions. Yet there is another reason wetlands attract scientific attention. Their complexity offers opportunities to study resilience itself. Resilience does not mean resisting all change. Instead, it involves adapting, reorganizing, and continuing to function despite disturbance. Swamps have survived floods, storms, droughts, and countless environmental fluctuations. Their persistence emerges not from rigidity but from flexibility. Diverse species occupy overlapping roles. Resources move through multiple pathways. The system remains dynamic rather than fixed. Perhaps nowhere is this resilience more dramatic than during major storms. To human observers, severe weather often appears destructive, and certainly storms can alter wetlands significantly. Trees may fall, channels may shift, floodwaters may rearrange entire sections of landscape, yet many swamp ecosystems evolved alongside periodic disturbance. Some species depend upon flooding to disperse seeds. Nutrients carried by floodwaters can revitalize habitats. New openings in forest canopies create opportunities for different plants to establish themselves. Over long periods, disturbance becomes part of the system rather than an exception to it. This does not mean every change is beneficial, nor that ecosystems are immune to damage. Rather, it illustrates a broader truth about nature. Stability is rarely achieved through permanence. Instead, it often emerges through continuous adjustment. The swamp remains itself precisely because it changes. As evening approaches once again, light begins withdrawing from the water. Reflections deepen. Shadows lengthen beneath cypress branches. Daytime activity gradually yields to the rhythms of approaching night. Insects alter their behavior. Birds seek resting places. Nocturnal creatures prepare to emerge. The transition happens so gradually that it can be difficult to identify the exact moment when day becomes evening. Many of the most important transitions in nature occur this way, not as sudden events but as slow shifts, almost invisible while they are happening. Human lives contain similar passages. We often recognize them clearly only in retrospect. The swamp, with its blurred boundaries and gradual transformations, offers a quiet lesson in accepting such uncertainty. Not every process announces itself with dramatic clarity. Sometimes change unfolds like fading sunlight across dark water, gentle enough to pass unnoticed until the landscape has become something new. And as the first stars begin appearing above the trees, the ancient relationship between swamps and the night sky slowly comes into view. For most of human history, the night sky above a swamp would have appeared far brighter than it does for many people today. Far from cities and artificial lights, wetlands often existed beneath vast domes of darkness illuminated only by the moon, the planets, and innumerable stars. In such places, water became a second sky. Reflections transformed ponds and channels into mirrors capable of doubling the visible universe. A bright star hovering above the horizon might appear simultaneously overhead and beneath one's feet. The effect could be disorienting, even enchanting. Early travelers crossing wetlands at night frequently described sensations of unreality, as though familiar distinctions between earth and sky had momentarily dissolved. Modern astronomy has revealed the immense scale hidden behind those points of light, yet understanding their true nature often deepens rather than diminishes their mystery. The stars reflected in swamp water may represent sunlight emitted years, centuries, or even millennia ago. In that sense, every reflection contains a fragment of the past. The observer stands within the present while gazing at ancient light mirrored by water shaped through equally ancient ecological processes. This connection between distant time and immediate experience seems woven into the character of swamps themselves. Few landscapes encourage contemplation quite so naturally. Part of this effect may arise from sensory conditions. Wetlands often soften the visual intensity found in more open environments. Trees filter sunlight. Water absorbs and reflects it. Sounds travel differently through humid air. The result is a setting that encourages slower observation. Psychologists studying attention have found that certain natural environments help restore mental focus by engaging the mind gently, rather than demanding constant vigilance. Unlike crowded urban spaces filled with competing signals, wetlands offer patterns that are complex without being overwhelming. Ripples spread across water, leaves move in subtle winds, reflections shift gradually with changing light. The brain remains engaged while avoiding the exhaustion associated with continuous stimulation. It is perhaps no coincidence that many people describe experiences in wetlands as calming despite the abundance of life surrounding them. The calming effect does not emerge from emptiness, but from rhythm. Every ecosystem possesses rhythms, though they often operate beyond conscious awareness. In swamps, water levels rise and fall with seasons. Plants grow, flower, and decline according to environmental conditions. Animal populations expand and contract. Migrations occur. Breeding cycles begin and end. These patterns create a form of ecological timekeeping that has persisted for thousands of years. Human societies have long depended upon similar rhythms, particularly before industrialization reduced dependence on seasonal cycles. Farmers observed rainfall and flooding. Fishers tracked migrations. Communities adapted their activities to environmental patterns. Wetlands frequently played central roles within these relationships because their changes were visible indicators of broader conditions. A rising river, a flooded forest, or the appearance of certain species could signal transitions affecting entire regions. Long before scientific instruments existed, Careful observation of wetlands provided valuable information about the surrounding world. Such observations gradually accumulated into knowledge systems that were often remarkably sophisticated. Indigenous peoples throughout North America developed deep understandings of wetland environments, learning to interpret subtle ecological signs through generations of experience. They recognized seasonal changes, animal behavior, plant uses, and hydrological patterns with a level of detail that modern researchers continue to appreciate. These relationships remind us that science is not solely a collection of technologies or institutions. At its core, science begins with observation, curiosity, and a willingness to learn from the natural world. Swamps rewarded such attention because they revealed their secrets slowly. Patterns emerged over years rather than days, knowledge accumulated through patience. In many ways, the landscape itself encouraged a mindset centered on careful observation rather than immediate conclusions. Patience remains one of the most valuable tools in modern ecological research. Scientists studying wetlands often spend years monitoring the same locations, collecting data across seasons and decades. This long-term perspective is essential because many ecological processes unfold gradually. A short study might capture a temporary fluctuation while missing broader trends. Only through sustained observation can researchers distinguish between ordinary variability and meaningful change. This challenge reflects a broader truth about understanding complex systems. Important patterns frequently become visible only when viewed across sufficient spans of time. Human beings naturally focus on immediate events because immediate events affect us directly, yet many of the forces shaping the world operate at slower speeds. Climate patterns develop over decades, forests mature over centuries, wetlands evolve over millennia. The swamp quietly invites us to expand our sense of timescale. Expanding perspective often reveals unexpected relationships. Consider the connection between distant mountains and a lowland swamp hundreds of miles away. Rain falls on high elevations, streams gather into rivers. Sediments, nutrients, and organic matter travel downstream. Eventually, some portion of that material reaches wetlands, where it may become incorporated into soil, vegetation, or food webs. The swamp therefore contains traces of landscapes far beyond its visible boundaries. It is connected to places that many of its inhabitants will never encounter. Similar relationships extend throughout nature. Oceans influence weather patterns inland. Forests affect regional rainfall. Migratory animals transport nutrients across continents. The more ecological networks are studied, the more apparent their interconnectedness becomes. What initially appears isolated often proves deeply connected to distant systems. At night, these connections can feel almost tangible. Moonlight glides across water surfaces that have existed in one form or another for countless generations. Frogs continue their calls. Insects navigate through darkness. Somewhere overhead, migratory birds travel beneath the stars, following routes established long before modern maps existed. Beneath the water, fish move through channels shaped by years of flooding and sediment deposition. Above and below the surface, life continues according to patterns both ancient and ongoing. The swamp becomes a meeting place of timescales. Immediate moments unfold within processes that stretch across centuries. Individual lives intersect briefly with systems vastly older than themselves. There is something quietly reassuring about this perspective. It does not diminish human experience, but situates it within a larger context. Even decay takes on a different meaning in such a landscape. In many settings, decomposition is associated primarily with endings. Within a swamp, it becomes easier to recognize decomposition as transformation. Fallen leaves darken the water with tannins, dead plants enrich the soil, broken branches become habitats. Nutrients cycle continuously through living and non-living components of the ecosystem. Matter changes form but rarely disappears. The principle extends from microscopic organisms to towering trees. Every participant contributes to ongoing processes that transcend individual existence. Philosophers throughout history have explored similar ideas using different language, reflecting on continuity, impermanence, and renewal. The swamp illustrates these concepts not through abstract arguments, but through observable reality. Transformation is happening everywhere, all the time, often so gradually that it escapes notice. As midnight deepens and darkness settles fully across the wetland, visibility narrows while awareness of sound expands. The landscape becomes less defined by what can be seen and more by what can be sensed indirectly. Water laps gently against roots. Wings flutter somewhere beyond sight. A distant call echoes across open channels. The mind begins constructing images from fragments of information, filling darkness with possibilities. Yet beneath this mystery lies an environment governed by ecological principles as real and measurable as those found anywhere on Earth. The wonder of swamps does not arise because they defy understanding. It arises because understanding reveals layer after layer of complexity, each leading naturally to another. And hidden among those layers, beneath roots that have stood through countless seasons, another story is waiting. One written not in water or trees, but in the remarkable creatures that have made these wetlands their home for millions of years. Among the countless creatures that inhabit swamps, some seem almost perfectly designed to reinforce the sense of antiquity that these landscapes inspire. Alligators drifting silently through dark water often appear less like modern animals and more like survivors from another age. Their eyes and nostrils remain just above the surface while the rest of the body disappears beneath reflections and shadows. To encounter one in still water is to witness a form shaped by millions of years of evolutionary refinement. The ancestors of crocodilians appeared long before human beings existed, enduring environmental changes that eliminated innumerable other lineages. Yet despite their formidable appearance, alligators contribute to wetland ecosystems in ways that extend beyond their role as predators. Their movements create pathways through dense vegetation. Their nests provide resources for other species. During dry periods, depressions they excavate can retain water that supports aquatic life. Even the largest and most intimidating residents of a swamp participate in networks of ecological relationships far more intricate than simple notions of predator and prey might suggest. The presence of such ancient creatures naturally invites reflection on deep time. Human history often feels expansive because it encompasses civilizations, inventions, migrations, and cultural transformations stretching back thousands of years. Yet the timeline of life extends vastly further. Long before the first cities emerged, wetlands already existed in various forms across the planet. Ancient forests flourished in waterlogged landscapes. Amphibians explored environments that blurred the boundary between aquatic and terrestrial worlds. Entire ecosystems appeared, changed, and disappeared while continents shifted position over geological ages. The swamp serves as a living reminder that Earth has been conducting experiments in adaptation and survival for an almost unimaginable length of time. Every species visible today represents the latest chapter in a story written across countless generations. To stand within a wetland is, in a sense, to stand within a landscape shaped by evolutionary history itself. Amphibians perhaps illustrate this history more clearly than any other group. Frogs, salamanders, and their relatives occupy a unique position in the story of life. Their existence reflects an ancient transition that transformed the planet. Hundreds of millions of years ago, vertebrate animals began expanding from aquatic environments onto land, initiating one of the most significant developments in evolutionary history. Modern amphibians retain traces of this heritage. Many begin life in water before undergoing remarkable transformations that allow them to inhabit terrestrial environments. Their skin remains closely linked to moisture. Their reproductive cycles often depend upon wetlands. In this way, swamps preserve echoes of evolutionary milestones that occurred long before mammals, birds, or humans appeared. A chorus of frogs on a warm evening is not merely a collection of sounds. It is the continuation of biological patterns rooted in deep geological time. The voices of those frogs reveal another fascinating characteristic of swamp ecosystems. Sound often matters as much as sight. Dense vegetation, darkness, and reflective water surfaces can limit visibility, making acoustic communication especially valuable. Different species produce calls with distinctive frequencies, rhythms, and structures. Some advertise territory. Others attract mates. Certain calls signal danger. Researchers studying animal communication have discovered astonishing levels of complexity within these vocal systems. A swamp at night may sound like a single chorus to an unfamiliar listener, yet individual species recognize specific signals amid the broader soundscape. Each call occupies its own ecological niche within an environment already crowded with information. The result resembles a living orchestra whose participants perform without a conductor, coordinated through evolutionary processes rather than conscious design. Water itself contributes to this acoustic world in subtle ways. Sound travels efficiently through water, allowing aquatic animals to detect movements and vibrations that humans might never notice. Fish perceive disturbances generated by nearby organisms. Certain insects locate prey through minute ripples. Even slight changes in water movement can carry information across surprising distances. Scientists increasingly recognize that many ecosystems operate through networks of sensory exchanges invisible to human perception. We tend to prioritize vision because it dominates our own experience, yet countless species interpret reality through different combinations of sound, vibration, chemical signals, and environmental cues. The swamp, therefore, contains layers of communication occurring continuously beyond ordinary awareness. What seems quiet to us may be filled with information for its inhabitants. Perhaps this hidden richness helps explain why wetlands have so often inspired curiosity among naturalists. Some environments reveal themselves readily. Open grasslands allow observers to see great distances. Deserts expose much of their structure directly. Swamps are different. Their complexity frequently remains concealed beneath vegetation, water, and shadow. Discovery requires patience. A motionless branch becomes a turtle. A patch of floating leaves conceals fish beneath. A still pool contains microorganisms numbering in the millions. The landscape rewards sustained attention by revealing details gradually. In psychological terms, this process activates one of the mind's most powerful sources of engagement, the pleasure of discovery. Humans are naturally curious creatures. We derive satisfaction from uncovering patterns, solving mysteries, and expanding understanding. The swamp offers endless opportunities for such exploration because it rarely reveals everything at once. Curiosity itself may have deeper evolutionary roots than many people realize. The desire to investigate unfamiliar environments likely provided survival advantages throughout human history. New sources of food, water, shelter, or information could improve chances of survival. Yet curiosity also carries risks. Unknown places might contain dangers as well as opportunities. Swamps embody this balance particularly well. Their complexity attracts attention while simultaneously encouraging caution. Ancient travelers approached wetlands with respect because they understood that appearances could be misleading. Water depth might change unexpectedly. Stable ground could become soft and unstable. Weather conditions could transform familiar routes. Modern science has explained many of these phenomena, but the emotional response remains recognizable. We continue to feel a mixture of fascination and uncertainty in places that resist immediate understanding. This combination of fascination and uncertainty becomes especially powerful during twilight. As daylight fades, familiar landmarks soften, reflections deepen, distances become more difficult to judge. Many animals begin changing their behavior in response to shifting light levels. Crepuscular species, active primarily during dawn and dusk, emerge during these transitional periods. Predators adjust hunting strategies. Prey species alter movement patterns. Ecological interactions reorganize themselves according to the changing conditions. Twilight represents more than a visual phenomenon. It is an ecological event that influences countless organisms simultaneously. The swamp responds as an integrated system, its rhythms adjusting to the gradual transition between day and night. Watching such transitions unfold can create an unusual awareness of time, not clock time measured in minutes and hours, but ecological time expressed through cycles and recurring patterns. Sunset follows sunrise. Seasons follow one another. Generations replace generations. Wetlands persist through these repetitions while continuously changing within them. The same swamp may appear different every year, yet still remain recognizably itself. This coexistence of continuity and change lies at the heart of many natural systems. Stability emerges not because nothing changes, but because change occurs within enduring patterns. The lesson is subtle, yet it appears repeatedly throughout nature. As darkness settles fully across the water once more, stars begin appearing between the silhouettes of cypress branches. Reflections shimmer beneath them. The sounds of nocturnal life grow stronger while daytime activity recedes into memory. Somewhere beneath the surface, creatures continue navigating channels and root systems invisible from above. Ancient evolutionary stories continue unfolding in the present moment. The swamp remains what it has always been, a place where boundaries blur, where hidden worlds overlap, and where patient observation reveals connections stretching across scales of space and time. And among those connections, woven quietly through water, soil, plants, and animals alike, lies one of the most remarkable functions wetlands perform for the entire living planet. That remarkable function begins with something so familiar that it is easy to overlook: the simple act of water moving across the landscape. Rain falls from clouds formed by evaporation from oceans, lakes, rivers, and forests. Gravity draws that water downhill through countless pathways. Some of it rushes across the surface in streams and rivers. Some sinks into soil and travels slowly underground. Eventually, much of it encounters wetlands, where movement often slows dramatically. What might have been a swift journey becomes a gradual passage through roots, sediments, vegetation, and shallow channels. This slowing of water is one of the swamp's greatest ecological gifts. By reducing speed, wetlands create opportunities for countless processes that would otherwise be impossible. Sediments settle, nutrients are absorbed, pollutants are filtered, habitats develop, life flourishes. The swamp functions not merely as a destination for water, but as a living system that transforms it. In many ways, wetlands act as intermediaries between the atmosphere, the land, and the rivers that connect them, quietly influencing the quality and behavior of water long before it reaches larger bodies downstream. Scientists often describe wetlands as natural filters, though the phrase only hints at the complexity involved. As water passes through a swamp, physical, chemical, and biological processes interact continuously. Fine particles settle onto the bottom. Plants absorb nutrients through extensive root systems. Microorganisms break down organic compounds and alter the chemical composition of the surrounding environment. Certain pollutants become trapped within sediments, while others are transformed through biological activity. These processes occur simultaneously across enormous areas, often without attracting attention. Unlike a machine operating within a visible facility, the swamp performs its work through living communities spread across forests, marshes, and shallow waters. Every root, every microorganism, every layer of soil contributes to outcomes that influence ecosystems far beyond the wetland itself. It is one of nature's most elegant examples of distributed intelligence, where no single organism directs the process, yet the collective result is remarkably effective. The idea that complex outcomes can emerge from countless simple interactions appears throughout nature. Ant colonies build intricate networks without centralized planning. Bird flocks coordinate movements without a leader directing every turn. Coral reefs construct vast structures through the accumulated activity of tiny organisms. Swamps belong to this same category of phenomena. Their ecological functions arise from interactions among innumerable living and non-living components. No tree understands the entire ecosystem. No fish controls the flow of nutrients. No microorganism comprehends the larger system it helps sustain. Yet together they generate patterns that maintain stability and resilience across large scales. This observation has fascinated scientists for decades because it challenges assumptions about how order emerges. Nature often achieves extraordinary complexity not through centralized control, but through cooperation among countless participants following local rules. Such cooperation extends even to relationships that might initially appear competitive. Plants growing within a swamp compete for sunlight, nutrients, and space. Yet their collective presence stabilizes soil, influences water movement, and creates habitats supporting diverse forms of life. Predators reduce certain populations while helping maintain ecological balance. Decomposers break down dead material, releasing nutrients that fuel new growth. The ecosystem depends upon interactions that include both cooperation and competition. Human beings sometimes prefer simple categories: friend or enemy, beneficial or harmful, success or failure. Nature rarely operates according to such neat divisions. Swamps illustrate this beautifully. Organisms influence one another in ways that are often complex, indirect, and context-dependent. A process that appears destructive in one circumstance may support renewal in another. Fire offers a striking example. Although many people associate wetlands primarily with water, certain swamp ecosystems experience periodic fires. During dry seasons, accumulated vegetation may burn under appropriate conditions. At first glance, fire and swamp seem incompatible, yet some wetland communities evolved alongside recurring fire regimes and depend upon them for long-term health. Fire can reduce excessive vegetation, recycle nutrients, and create opportunities for particular species to thrive. Seeds dormant within soil may germinate only after exposure to heat or changing environmental conditions. Once again, the lesson emerges that nature often operates through cycles rather than static states. Processes that appear contradictory from a distance frequently prove complementary when viewed within larger ecological contexts. Cycles are perhaps most visible in the changing seasons. In temperate wetlands, spring brings renewed growth. Trees produce fresh leaves, migratory birds return, amphibians begin breeding activities. Summer introduces warmth, abundant vegetation, and heightened biological activity. Autumn alters colors and shifts ecological priorities as organisms prepare for colder conditions. Winter may quiet portions of the landscape, though life continues beneath the surface and within sheltered habitats. Each season transforms the appearance and behavior of the swamp while preserving the continuity of the ecosystem itself. These recurring changes have shaped the lives of countless generations of animals and humans alike. Long before calendars existed, seasonal patterns provided reliable signals around which life could organize itself. Yet even the seasons are only part of a larger story. Over decades and centuries, swamps undergo transformations that may be almost imperceptible within a single lifetime. Channels shift position, trees mature and eventually fall. Sediments accumulate, plant communities change, new habitats emerge while others disappear. Ecologists refer to some of these gradual changes as succession, the process through which ecosystems evolve over time. Succession does not follow a rigid script. Instead, it reflects ongoing interactions among environmental conditions, disturbances, and biological communities. A swamp observed today may look very different centuries from now, yet those future changes will emerge from processes already underway. The landscape is never finished. It remains engaged in a continuous act of becoming. This sense of ongoing transformation becomes especially vivid when considering the age of certain wetland trees. Some cypress trees have lived for centuries, surviving storms, floods, droughts, and countless seasonal cycles. They stood beside waters long before modern roads existed. They continued growing while generations of humans were born, lived, and passed away. Within their trunks, annual growth rings preserve records of environmental conditions experienced across decades. Researchers can study these rings to learn about past climates, rainfall patterns, and ecological events. The tree becomes both organism and archive, living participant and historical document simultaneously. Such examples encourage a broader perspective on time. Human lives feel long from the inside because they encompass our entire experience. Yet in the presence of centuries-old trees rooted in ancient wetlands, it becomes easier to appreciate the continuity extending beyond individual lifetimes. Perhaps this continuity contributes to the profound sense of calm many people experience near water. Psychologists continue investigating the reasons, but several possibilities have emerged. Water provides gentle sensory stimulation through movement, reflection, and sound. Natural environments reduce certain forms of cognitive fatigue. Rhythmic patterns encourage relaxation. Whatever the precise mechanisms, humans across cultures have repeatedly sought places where water and land meet. Rivers, lakeshores, coastlines, and wetlands possess a distinctive capacity to capture attention without overwhelming it. Swamps achieve this effect in a uniquely subtle manner. Their beauty is rarely dramatic, it unfolds gradually through observation. A reflection catches the eye. A bird moves among reeds. A ripple spreads across still water. The landscape rewards patience rather than demanding it. As another night deepens over the wetland, moonlight begins tracing silver pathways across channels hidden among trees. The surface reflects both the sky above and the life below. Frogs continue their calls from unseen locations. Insects move through humid air. Water flows quietly through roots established over generations. The swamp remains engaged in countless processes simultaneously, filtering water, storing carbon, supporting biodiversity, preserving ecological memory, and sustaining relationships that stretch far beyond its visible boundaries. Yet none of these functions announce themselves loudly. They unfold with the same patient rhythm that has characterized wetlands for thousands of years. And somewhere within that rhythm, beneath the stillness and mystery that first draw attention, another layer of the swamp's story begins to emerge. One that reveals how these landscapes have shaped human imagination almost as profoundly as they have shaped the natural world. Human imagination has always been drawn toward places that seem to exist between familiar categories. Mountains rise above ordinary experience and inspire awe. Deserts appear vast and unknowable. Oceans conceal worlds beneath their surfaces. Swamps occupy a different kind of mystery. They are neither entirely hidden nor fully revealed. Their secrets often lie only a few steps beyond sight, obscured by reeds, mist, reflections, and shadow. This quality has given wetlands a distinctive place within stories, legends, and cultural memory across many civilizations. Long before ecological science explained their functions, people sensed that swamps possessed a character unlike other landscapes. They were places where certainty seemed less reliable. Distances became difficult to judge. Sounds carried unexpectedly across water. Familiar pathways could vanish beneath seasonal floods. Such environments naturally encouraged storytelling because the human mind instinctively seeks explanations for experiences that feel unusual or difficult to predict. Many ancient tales transformed these uncertainties into myths. Spirits were said to inhabit wetlands. Hidden kingdoms were imagined beneath dark waters. Strange lights appearing over marshes inspired stories of wandering souls, supernatural guides, or mysterious travelers. Modern science has provided explanations for many of these phenomena. Certain gases produced by decomposition can occasionally ignite or interact with environmental conditions in ways that create unusual lights. Mist can distort perception. Reflections can make ordinary objects appear unfamiliar. Yet, understanding the mechanisms behind these experiences does not entirely erase their emotional impact. The swamp remains capable of producing moments that feel uncanny because it frequently alters the sensory information upon which perception depends. The mind is constantly constructing reality from incomplete data. When visibility decreases, sounds travel differently, and landmarks become ambiguous. Imagination naturally becomes more active. This relationship between uncertainty and imagination extends far beyond folklore. Psychologists have long studied the ways in which environments influence thought and emotion. Places that provide partial information often stimulate curiosity more effectively than places where everything is immediately visible. A winding path invites exploration more readily than a straight road whose destination is already apparent. A closed book generates anticipation because its contents remain unknown. Swamps operate according to a similar principle. They reveal themselves gradually. Every turn in a waterway, every opening in the vegetation, every shift in light presents new details. The landscape encourages observation because there is always another layer waiting just beyond the current view. This quality may help explain why wetlands continue attracting artists, photographers, naturalists, and writers, despite their often challenging conditions. The environment rewards attention with discovery. The discoveries are not always dramatic. In fact, many of the most meaningful observations within a swamp involve small details that might easily be overlooked elsewhere. A spider web suspended between reeds catches morning dew and becomes visible only when sunlight reaches a particular angle. A turtle remains motionless on a log for so long that it seems part of the landscape itself. Tiny fish gather among submerged roots where shifting patterns of light create constantly changing mosaics beneath the water. Such moments illustrate an important feature of perception. The world often contains more information than we notice. Attention acts as a filter, selecting only a fraction of available sensory input. Natural environments that encourage slower observation can therefore feel richer, not because they contain more reality than other places, but because they invite us to notice more of what is already there. This invitation to notice extends to the passage of time itself. In modern life, many experiences are structured around speed. Information arrives instantly. Communication occurs across continents in moments. Entertainment changes with a swipe or click. Swamps operate according to very different tempos. Water moves slowly through channels. Trees require decades to reach maturity. Soil develops through processes unfolding across centuries. Even daily activity often follows rhythms dictated by sunlight, temperature, and seasonal cycles rather than human schedules. Spending time in such environments can create a subtle shift in awareness. The pace of observation begins aligning more closely with the pace of the landscape. Small changes become significant because attention is no longer rushing past them. Scientists sometimes refer to this phenomenon as temporal scaling, the ability to perceive events across different timescales. A dragonfly darting across the water represents one scale of activity. The growth of a cypress forest represents another. The formation of wetland soils over thousands of years belongs to yet another. All occur simultaneously, yet each unfolds according to its own rhythm. Human perception tends to focus on middle ranges where events are neither too fast nor too slow. Swamps offer opportunities to expand that perception by presenting evidence of processes operating across many scales at once. A single view may contain an insect living only weeks, a tree surviving centuries, and sediments preserving records of millennia. The coexistence of these timescales becomes especially striking at dawn. Before sunrise, the swamp often appears suspended between worlds. Darkness has not fully departed, yet daylight has begun its gradual return. Mist gathers above water surfaces, bird song emerges from scattered locations, first as isolated calls and then as increasingly complex choruses. The sky brightens almost imperceptibly. Reflections shift, colors return to leaves and water. What appears to be a simple sunrise is, in ecological terms, an immense transition affecting countless organisms simultaneously. Plants prepare for photosynthesis. Insects alter behavior. Predators and prey respond to changing visibility. The entire ecosystem adjusts to the arrival of light. Light itself is one of the most influential forces shaping life within wetlands. Sunlight determines where plants can grow, how energy enters food webs, and when many organisms are active. Yet in swamps, light rarely behaves in straightforward ways. Water reflects it, trees filter it, mist scatters it, shadows fragment it. As a result, wetlands often display visual qualities unlike those found in more open environments. Beams of sunlight penetrate gaps in vegetation and illuminate isolated patches of water. Reflections create illusions of depth and movement. Surfaces appear to merge with the sky. Photographers frequently describe wetlands as landscapes of changing light because the same location can look entirely different depending on weather, season, and time of day. These changing appearances remind us that environments are not fixed objects but dynamic relationships between matter, energy, and perception. The swamp visible at sunrise is not exactly the same swamp visible at midnight, even though the physical location remains unchanged. Different species are active. Different sounds dominate. Different visual patterns emerge. Human experience of the landscape changes accordingly. In this sense, every visit reveals only one version of a place that contains many possible versions. The wetland becomes a collection of overlapping realities shaped by time, weather, season, and perspective. As morning advances and sunlight spreads through the trees, life intensifies across the ecosystem. Birds search for food among branches and shorelines. Insects rise from the water. Ripples appear where fish disturb the surface. The apparent stillness that often defines the swamp from a distance gives way to evidence of constant activity. Yet even amid this movement, a deeper sense of continuity remains. The processes unfolding today resemble those that occurred yesterday, those that occurred centuries ago, and those that will likely continue long into the future. Water will flow, plants will grow, animals will adapt, nutrients will cycle through countless forms of life. The swamp will continue performing its quiet work while revealing its mysteries slowly to those willing to observe. And perhaps that is one of the most remarkable truths about wetlands. The more they are studied, the less they resemble the barren wastelands they were once believed to be. Instead, they emerge as some of the most intricate, productive, and fascinating environments on Earth. Living intersections of water, time, memory, and life itself, where every reflection, every sound, and every hidden movement hints at still deeper stories waiting beneath the surface. Beneath that surface, where reflections conceal more than they reveal, an entire universe continues its quiet existence beyond ordinary human awareness. A single handful of swamp water may contain thousands of microscopic organisms engaged in activities essential to the functioning of the ecosystem. Bacteria break down organic matter molecule by molecule. Protozoa hunt and consume even smaller life forms. Algae capture sunlight and transform it into usable energy. Tiny invertebrates drift through currents so subtle they seem motionless from a human perspective. To the naked eye, swamp water may appear dark and still. Under magnification, it becomes a landscape crowded with movement and interaction. This hidden world reflects a broader truth about nature. Reality often contains layers that remain invisible until the appropriate tools or perspectives reveal them. The history of science is filled with such discoveries. Telescopes uncovered galaxies beyond imagination. Microscopes revealed entire realms of life. Wetlands provide a particularly vivid example, because so much of their complexity exists beneath the threshold of casual observation. The organisms inhabiting these microscopic worlds perform functions upon which larger forms of life depend. Without decomposers, dead material would accumulate indefinitely. Without photosynthetic microorganisms, energy would enter ecosystems less efficiently. Without intricate microbial communities, nutrient cycles would falter. Modern ecology increasingly recognizes that some of the most important processes in nature occur at scales too small for direct human perception. The swamp serves as a reminder that significance is not determined by size. Tiny organisms collectively shape the chemistry of water, the fertility of soils, and the availability of resources throughout the ecosystem. Their influence extends outward through food webs and environmental processes, until it affects creatures many millions of times larger than themselves. This pattern repeats across nature. Small causes often contribute to large outcomes. A single seed carried by water may eventually become a towering tree. Minute changes in temperature can alter migration patterns across entire regions. Tiny organisms can influence the movement of carbon through global systems. Human beings sometimes struggle to appreciate such relationships because our attention gravitates toward visible results rather than gradual processes. We notice the mature forest more readily than the seed from which it originated. We observe the river but rarely consider the countless droplets composing it. Swamps encourage a different perspective because their complexity emerges through accumulation. Countless small interactions combine to create landscapes of extraordinary richness. Accumulation is also evident in the physical structure of wetlands. Year after year, leaves fall into the water, branches break, plants grow and die, sediments settle. Organic material gathers in layers. Individually, these events seem insignificant. Collectively, they transform entire landscapes. In some regions, wetlands have accumulated deposits many meters thick through processes unfolding across thousands of years. The ground itself becomes a record of persistence. Each layer represents countless seasons of growth, decay, flooding, and renewal. Scientists examining sediment cores extracted from wetlands can read these layers much like historians read documents. Variations in pollen reveal changes in vegetation. Chemical signatures provide clues about environmental conditions. Fragments of charcoal may indicate ancient fires. The swamp preserves evidence not because it intends to record history, but because the conditions within it happen to slow the disappearance of the past. There is something quietly profound about this accidental preservation. Human societies devote enormous effort to recording information through books, monuments, photographs, and digital archives. Yet nature has been creating archives of its own for millions of years. Ice cores preserve atmospheric histories. Tree rings record seasonal growth. Coral skeletons document ocean conditions. Wetland sediments capture traces of ancient environments. These records are incomplete, yet they reveal patterns extending far beyond the span of human memory. They remind us that the Earth itself retains echoes of previous ages, waiting for curious minds to uncover and interpret them. Among the most intriguing discoveries recovered from wetland environments are objects that connect directly to human history. Because oxygen levels are often low beneath waterlogged soils, materials that would rapidly decay elsewhere can sometimes survive for centuries. Wooden tools, fragments of boats, woven baskets, and traces of ancient settlements have emerged from wetlands around the world. Such discoveries offer rare glimpses into everyday life from distant eras. Unlike stone monuments or metal artifacts, these preserved objects often reveal ordinary activities rather than grand historical events. A wooden paddle, a fishing implement, or a section of woven material carries intimate evidence of how people interacted with their environment. Wetlands become bridges between ecological history and human history, preserving stories that might otherwise have vanished completely. These connections highlight the long relationship between people and swamps. Although wetlands were often viewed with suspicion or fear, they also provided valuable resources. Fish, birds, edible plants, building materials, and transportation routes supported human communities for thousands of years. Indigenous cultures frequently developed deep knowledge of wetland environments, learning to navigate seasonal changes and ecological rhythms with remarkable skill. Their understanding emerged through observation accumulated across generations. Every flood, migration, flowering season, and weather pattern contributed to a growing body of knowledge. Such relationships demonstrate that humans are not separate from ecological systems. We are participants within them, shaped by the environments we inhabit just as we influence those environments in return. Influence, however, is not always balanced. In many regions, wetlands have been altered dramatically by human activity. Rivers have been redirected, forests cleared, water levels changed, vast areas drained for agriculture or development. For much of recent history, these transformations were viewed as signs of progress. Wetlands were often considered obstacles to be removed rather than ecosystems to be understood. Only gradually did the ecological consequences become apparent. Flooding increased in some areas, water quality declined, wildlife populations diminished. Valuable ecological functions disappeared. The realization that wetlands provide benefits extending far beyond their immediate boundaries represented a significant shift in environmental thinking. It required looking beyond short-term appearances to recognize long-term relationships. Recognition often arrives slowly. This is true not only in environmental science but in many aspects of human understanding. Complex systems reveal their importance gradually because their effects emerge over time. The swamp exemplifies this principle. Its value lies not in a single dramatic feature but in the accumulation of countless functions operating together. It stores carbon, filters water, supports biodiversity, moderates floods, preserves history, and sustains intricate ecological networks. None of these roles alone fully defines the ecosystem. Their significance emerges through combination. The whole becomes greater than the sum of its parts. As afternoon light softens across the wetland, shadows begin stretching once again beneath trees and along winding channels. A heron stands motionless near the water's edge, patient as a statue while watching for movement below the surface. Dragonflies patrol sunlit openings. Turtles rest upon fallen logs warmed by hours of sunlight. Everywhere, Life continues according to rhythms refined through generations. Some creatures live only weeks, others may survive decades. Yet all participate in cycles extending beyond individual existence. The swamp remains a place of paradoxes. It appears still yet teems with activity. It seems ancient yet changes constantly. It can feel mysterious while simultaneously revealing profound scientific truths. Perhaps this combination explains why wetlands continue captivating those who spend time within them. They satisfy curiosity without exhausting it. Every answer leads naturally to additional questions. Every observation reveals further layers of complexity. The deeper one looks, the more interconnected everything becomes. And as evening approaches once more, bringing cooler air and lengthening reflections across the darkening water, another transformation begins. Day gradually yields to night. Diurnal creatures retreat while nocturnal voices prepare to rise. The swamp shifts once again into a different version of itself, revealing rhythms that have repeated for countless generations beneath the turning sky. As twilight deepens, the transformation unfolds so gradually that it is almost impossible to identify the exact moment when one world gives way to another. Colors fade from bright greens and golds into muted shades of gray and blue. Reflections become more prominent than the objects creating them. Water that seemed transparent during daylight turns dark and mysterious once again. Across the wetland, countless organisms respond to these changes with remarkable precision. Internal biological clocks, shaped by millions of years of evolution, help synchronize activity with the daily cycle of light and darkness. Birds that dominated the soundscape throughout the afternoon become quieter. Frogs begin calling from concealed locations. Insects emerge in greater numbers. Predators adapted to low-light conditions start moving through habitats that would have exposed them during the day. The entire ecosystem reorganizes itself according to a schedule written not by clocks, but by the predictable rotation of the Earth. This daily transition reveals one of the most fundamental truths about life on our planet. Nearly every organism exists within cycles. Some cycles last hours, others span seasons, years, or generations. The rhythm of daylight and darkness is among the oldest and most universal. Long before humans measured time, life evolved mechanisms for anticipating sunrise and sunset. Plants adjust their physiology according to changing light levels. Animals coordinate feeding, migration, and reproduction with recurring environmental patterns. Wetlands provide an especially vivid stage upon which these cycles become visible because so many species concentrate within relatively small areas. Observing a swamp over the course of a single day is like watching a carefully choreographed performance whose participants have rehearsed their roles across evolutionary time. Yet beneath these familiar daily rhythms lie cycles of even greater scale. Consider the water moving through a swamp at this moment. A portion may have evaporated from an ocean months earlier, traveled through the atmosphere as vapor, condensed into clouds, and fallen as rain. Some may eventually return to rivers and continue toward distant seas. The molecules themselves participate in journeys that can span continents and centuries. The water in a swamp is never entirely local. It is part of a planetary circulation system connecting mountains, forests, oceans, rivers, and wetlands into a single hydrological network. This realization can alter the way one perceives even the simplest scene. A quiet pool of water no longer appears isolated. It becomes a temporary gathering place within an endless cycle of movement. The same principle applies to many other elements within the ecosystem. Carbon moves through plants, animals, soil, and atmosphere. Nutrients circulate through food webs. Seeds travel on wind, water, and the bodies of animals. Energy enters the system through sunlight and gradually flows through countless organisms before dispersing as heat. Nothing remains entirely separate for long. Ecology repeatedly demonstrates that apparent boundaries often conceal deeper connections. The swamp embodies this lesson with unusual clarity because it occupies a position where multiple worlds intersect. Water meets land, aquatic species interact with terrestrial species, local processes connect to global cycles. The wetland becomes a crossroads through which matter, energy, and life continuously pass. Perhaps because of this interconnectedness, swamps often produce a powerful sense of place. Certain landscapes can feel interchangeable. A road may resemble many others. A building can often be replicated elsewhere. Wetlands tend to resist such uniformity. Each develops according to unique combinations of geology, climate, hydrology, vegetation, and history. A cypress swamp in the southeastern United States differs dramatically from a northern forested wetland or a tropical mangrove system. Even neighboring wetlands may display distinct characteristics shaped by subtle environmental variations. Scientists studying ecosystems frequently encounter this complexity. General principles provide useful frameworks, but every landscape contains details that make it uniquely itself. The swamp teaches that understanding often requires attention to both patterns and particulars. Attention, in fact, may be one of the most valuable gifts that wetlands encourage. In a world increasingly saturated with distractions, environments that reward sustained observation become increasingly rare. A swamp rarely overwhelms the senses with dramatic spectacles. Its wonders emerge gradually. A listener notices layered sounds within the nighttime chorus. An observer recognizes changing reflections as clouds pass overhead. A naturalist discovers signs of animal activity hidden among roots and reeds. These experiences depend upon patience. The landscape reveals more to those willing to slow down. Such observation is not merely a recreational activity. It is the foundation of understanding. Every scientific discovery begins with someone noticing something worth investigating. Many of the greatest advances in ecological science emerged from precisely this kind of patient observation. Researchers spending years in wetlands documented migration routes, breeding behaviors, nutrient cycles, and hydrological processes that would have remained invisible during brief visits. Long-term studies revealed relationships impossible to detect over shorter timescales. Populations fluctuated according to patterns extending across decades. Environmental changes produced consequences that appeared only gradually. These findings reinforced an important principle. Complex systems often require long-term perspectives. Immediate appearances can be misleading. Trends become visible only through persistence. Persistence is woven into the very structure of wetlands. Trees survive storms that would seem devastating in the moment. Plant communities recover after floods. Animal populations adapt to changing conditions. Sediments accumulate year after year. The ecosystem endures not because it remains unchanged, but because it continually responds to change. Resilience emerges through flexibility. This concept has attracted attention far beyond ecology. Psychologists, sociologists, and systems theorists all study resilience as a property of complex systems. The swamp offers a natural example. Its strength lies not in resisting every disturbance but in maintaining function while adapting to new circumstances. As darkness settles fully across the water, stars begin appearing between gaps in the canopy. Their reflections shimmer on the surface, occasionally broken by the movement of fish or the ripple of a gentle breeze. Above, the universe stretches outward across unimaginable distances. Below, microscopic organisms continue their invisible work within the water and soil. Between these extremes lies the intricate web of life occupying the wetland itself. The scene encompasses scales so vast that they challenge comprehension. A single glance can include ancient starlight, centuries-old trees, migrating birds, and microorganisms completing life cycles measured in hours. Few environments illustrate the layered nature of reality so effectively. The swamp's mystery, then, is not the mystery of the unknown in the traditional sense. Science has explained many of its processes with impressive detail. Rather, it is the mystery that emerges when understanding reveals greater complexity than expected. Every answer uncovers additional questions. Every discovery exposes new relationships. The ecosystem becomes more fascinating, not less, as knowledge increases. This is one of the enduring pleasures of scientific exploration. The goal is not to eliminate wonder, but to deepen it. Far across the wetland, a frog calls into the darkness. Another answers from a distant patch of reeds. Water moves quietly through channels shaped by years of flooding and growth. Leaves rustle softly in a passing breeze. The sounds merge into a kind of ecological music, composed not by intention but by countless living processes unfolding together. Night has fully arrived now, and the swamp enters another chapter of its endless cycle, continuing patterns that began long before human memory and will likely persist long after the present moment has passed into history. History itself feels different in a swamp. In many landscapes, evidence of the past is exposed openly. Ancient ruins stand beneath the sun. Geological layers rise visibly along cliffs and canyon walls. Wetlands tend to conceal their histories beneath water, vegetation, and sediment. Their stories are often hidden rather than displayed, yet hidden does not mean absent. Beneath the dark surface may lie traces of storms that passed centuries ago, pollen from forests long vanished, or fragments of ecosystems that existed before recorded human history. Scientists extracting sediment cores from wetlands sometimes describe the experience as reading a book written one layer at a time across thousands of years. Each centimeter of mud preserves clues about a world that no longer exists. A change in pollen composition may indicate shifting climates. Tiny charcoal fragments may reveal ancient wildfires. Variations in chemistry can reflect floods, droughts, or environmental transformations that unfolded long before any human observer was present to record them. These records reveal a planet that has never been static. Forests advance and retreat. Rivers change course. Coastlines migrate. Species adapt, disperse, or disappear. Wetlands themselves evolve continually in response to these larger forces. A swamp existing today may occupy land that was once an open lake. Another may eventually become forest, meadow, or entirely different habitat, depending on environmental conditions. Such transformations remind us that permanence is often an illusion created by the relatively short span of human lives. Landscapes that seem timeless are frequently changing in ways too gradual for immediate perception. The swamp embodies this paradox. It can feel ancient and unchanging, while simultaneously participating in processes of constant transformation. The awareness of deep time often produces an unusual emotional response. Some people experience it as humility. Others describe a sense of wonder or perspective. When confronted with timescales extending thousands or millions of years, everyday concerns can appear smaller, though not necessarily less meaningful. A swamp encourages this perspective naturally, because so many of its processes operate beyond the boundaries of individual lifetimes. The trees may outlive generations. The soil may preserve records from distant ages. Water cycles connect present conditions to future outcomes. The ecosystem becomes a reminder that life unfolds within larger contexts than we often recognize during ordinary routines. Yet, despite these immense timescales, much of what makes a swamp beautiful exists only in fleeting moments. A dragonfly hovering above still water may remain visible for only seconds before vanishing into vegetation. Morning mist can disappear within minutes as sunlight warms the air. Reflections change continuously with shifting light and movement. The landscape therefore combines permanence and impermanence in equal measure. Ancient processes create conditions for transient experiences. Lasting structures support brief events. The coexistence of these qualities gives wetlands much of their distinctive atmosphere. They feel stable enough to inspire trust, yet dynamic enough to remain endlessly interesting. This balance is particularly evident during seasonal migrations. Every year, countless birds travel enormous distances between breeding and wintering grounds. Many depend upon wetlands as places to rest, feed, and recover energy during these journeys. A swamp that appears quiet one week may suddenly host an abundance of life as migrants arrive. For a brief period, species from distant regions share the same habitat before continuing their travels. Then, just as suddenly, they depart. The wetland remains while its temporary visitors move on. Similar patterns occur throughout nature. Places often endure longer than the individual organisms passing through them. The swamp serves as both destination and waypoint, offering resources that support lives unfolding across entire continents. The navigational abilities of migratory animals remain among the most remarkable phenomena in biology. Birds can travel thousands of miles with extraordinary accuracy. Some species return to the same wetland year after year, locating habitats they have not seen for months. Scientists continue investigating the mechanisms behind these journeys, uncovering evidence that animals use combinations of celestial cues, magnetic fields, visual landmarks, and environmental information. The more researchers learn, the more impressive these navigational systems appear. A small bird crossing vast distances possesses abilities that would have seemed almost magical to earlier generations. Yet these capacities emerged not through magic, but through evolution, shaped gradually by countless generations adapting to environmental challenges. Evolution itself leaves visible traces throughout the swamp. Every organism reflects solutions to specific problems. Water lilies spread broad leaves across the surface to maximize access to sunlight. Herons possess long legs, allowing them to move through shallow water while hunting. Amphibians maintain life cycles closely tied to aquatic environments. Even microorganisms display specialized adaptations suited to wetland conditions. The ecosystem resembles a vast collection of biological experiments conducted over immense spans of time. Species survive not because they are perfect, but because they are sufficiently adapted to current circumstances. Environmental changes then introduce new challenges, continuing the process indefinitely. One of the most fascinating aspects of this process is its creativity. Evolution does not follow a predetermined plan. Instead, it generates diversity through variation, selection, and time. Wetlands provide excellent examples because their conditions create numerous ecological opportunities. Different species exploit different niches. Some feed near the surface, others inhabit deeper water. Certain organisms specialize in dense vegetation, while others prefer open channels. The result is a remarkable variety of forms and behaviors. Biodiversity is not merely a collection of species names. It represents countless unique ways of experiencing and interacting with the world. Imagine for a moment the wetland from the perspective of its inhabitants. A dragonfly perceives rapid movements with extraordinary precision. A fish interprets vibrations traveling through water. A frog experiences the landscape through sound and moisture. An owl navigating the darkness relies upon senses adapted to low-light conditions. Each creature inhabits the same physical environment while experiencing it differently. Modern biology increasingly recognizes that every species occupies its own sensory world. Reality is not perceived identically by all observers. Instead, countless versions of the world overlap within the same space, shaped by different sensory abilities and ecological needs. The swamp therefore contains not one environment but many. The world of a turtle differs from that of a mosquito. The world of a heron differs from that of a microscopic organism living among submerged roots. These overlapping realities create a richness that extends beyond what humans can directly perceive. Scientific instruments allow glimpses into some of these hidden dimensions, but much remains beyond our experience. The realization can be strangely comforting. It suggests that the world is larger, more intricate, and more alive than our senses alone reveal. As midnight approaches, the wetland settles into a deeper rhythm. The sounds of the night continue, but they feel less like separate noises and more like parts of a single living system. Water reflects stars that may be hundreds or thousands of light years away. Ancient trees stand silently in the darkness. Beneath them, roots anchor ecosystems built through centuries of growth and change. Fish move through channels shaped by floods long forgotten. Tiny organisms continue recycling nutrients essential to the survival of larger forms of life. Everything remains connected through relationships so intricate that no single observer could fully comprehend them all. Perhaps that is the final lesson offered by the swamp. Understanding does not require complete mastery. One can appreciate complexity without unraveling every detail. The wetland invites curiosity while accepting mystery. It rewards knowledge while preserving wonder. The more deeply it is explored, the more it reveals a world defined not by isolation but by connection. A place where water, life, history, and time flow together so seamlessly that separating them becomes almost impossible. And somewhere beyond the dark channels and silent trees, the first faint signs of another approaching dawn are already beginning their slow, inevitable return. The approach of dawn begins long before the sun itself becomes visible. Somewhere beyond the horizon, light starts its gradual return, altering the atmosphere in subtle ways that many creatures detect before humans notice any change at all. The darkness softens almost imperceptibly. Stars near the horizon begin to fade. A faint silver quality emerges in the eastern sky. Within the swamp, biological clocks respond to signals refined across countless generations. Birds that remained silent through much of the night prepare to resume activity. Insects shift their behavior. Nocturnal hunters complete their final movements before retreating to daytime shelter. The wetland once again enters a period of transition, and as so often happens in nature, the transition itself becomes one of the most fascinating moments to observe. Scientists have long been interested in these periods between states. Dawn and dusk occupy a unique position because they alter the rules governing visibility, temperature, and behavior. Species active at night overlap briefly with those active during the day. Ecological interactions intensify as different communities encounter one another. For a short time, the swamp contains traces of both worlds simultaneously. Owls may still be hunting while songbirds begin their morning calls. Bats return toward roosts as dragonflies prepare to emerge. Such moments reveal the ecosystem as a continuum rather than a collection of separate compartments. Nature rarely operates through sharp boundaries. More often, it functions through gradients and transitions. The swamp itself is a kind of transition made permanent. It exists between water and land, between aquatic and terrestrial environments, between permanence and change. Perhaps this is one reason wetlands have proven so ecologically productive. Boundaries often create opportunities. Where two different systems meet, resources from both may become available. Organisms adapted to one environment interact with organisms adapted to another. Diversity increases, energy flows through new pathways. Ecologists frequently observe high levels of biological richness in transition zones, and wetlands represent some of the most extensive and dynamic transition zones on Earth. As the first sunlight reaches the upper branches of trees, another day begins. Dew clings to leaves and spiderwebs. Tiny droplets transform ordinary surfaces into intricate displays of reflected light. For a brief period, the swamp appears covered with countless miniature lenses, each bending and scattering sunlight in slightly different ways. The effect lasts only until rising temperatures cause the moisture to evaporate. Such fleeting beauty is common in natural systems. Many of the most extraordinary sights exist only because specific conditions align at particular moments. A fog bank illuminated by sunrise, a reflection perfectly mirrored on still water, a flock of birds crossing a brightening sky. These events feel special partly because they are temporary. Their value is enhanced by their impermanence. Impermanence, however, does not imply fragility. Wetlands have persisted through dramatic environmental changes across geological history. Sea levels have risen and fallen, climates have shifted, rivers have altered their courses, yet wetlands continue to emerge wherever conditions allow. They adapt, migrate, transform, and reappear. Their resilience stems not from resisting change but from incorporating it. Water levels fluctuate naturally, plant communities adjust, animal populations respond. The ecosystem remains dynamic. In many ways, the swamp embodies one of nature's most important principles. Long-term stability often depends upon flexibility rather than rigidity. This principle can be observed even in the trees themselves. A cypress standing in a swamp may appear motionless and permanent, yet it is constantly responding to its environment. Roots grow toward available resources. Leaves adjust to changing conditions. Growth rates vary according to rainfall and temperature. The tree survives because it remains engaged with its surroundings. Life is not a static condition but an ongoing process of adaptation. The same is true at every level of the ecosystem. Organisms respond to weather patterns, seasonal shifts, and interactions with other species. The swamp endures because its inhabitants participate in continuous adjustment. As daylight strengthens, The water reveals details hidden throughout the night. Fish become visible beneath the surface. Aquatic plants emerge from shadow. Reflections still dominate certain angles, yet transparency gradually returns. This transformation illustrates a recurring theme within the swamp. Visibility is always partial. Some things become easier to see while others remain concealed. During the day, visual information increases but microscopic processes remain hidden. At night, sounds become more prominent while shapes disappear. Scientific instruments reveal certain aspects of reality while leaving others unexplored. Knowledge expands, yet complete understanding remains elusive. Far from being a limitation, this incompleteness may be one of the reasons curiosity persists. If every mystery were solved entirely, exploration would lose much of its appeal. The swamp continues attracting researchers precisely because unanswered questions remain. Scientists still investigate the details of nutrient cycling, species interactions, microbial communities, and long-term ecological change. New technologies reveal patterns that earlier generations could not detect. Satellite imagery tracks landscape transformations across decades. Genetic analysis uncovers relationships among organisms. Advanced sensors monitor water movement and environmental conditions. Each discovery adds depth to understanding, while simultaneously opening new avenues of inquiry. The relationship between knowledge and mystery is often misunderstood. Many people imagine that scientific explanations remove wonder from the world. In practice, the opposite frequently occurs. Learning how a wetland functions does not make it less remarkable. Understanding that dark water derives its color from tannins released by decomposing vegetation does not diminish its beauty. Knowing how migratory birds navigate thousands of miles only increases appreciation for their journeys. Science transforms mystery from something feared into something explored. It replaces uncertainty with curiosity while preserving the sense of awe that first inspired investigation. Throughout history, wetlands have repeatedly undergone this transformation in human perception. Places once dismissed as useless or threatening gradually revealed themselves as ecological treasures. Their importance to biodiversity became clearer. Their role in water regulation gained recognition. Their capacity to store carbon and preserve environmental history emerged through research. The story of wetlands is therefore also a story about learning to see more clearly. It demonstrates how assumptions can change when observation deepens and understanding grows. By mid-morning, sunlight filters through the canopy in bright shafts. Insects move among illuminated patches of air. Birds search branches and shorelines for food. The wetland feels fully awake once more. Yet beneath this apparent familiarity, ancient processes continue. Carbon cycles through living systems. Water moves through roots and soil. Microorganisms transform nutrients. Sediments accumulate fraction by fraction. Every moment contributes to patterns extending far beyond immediate perception. Perhaps this is what makes swamps such compelling subjects for reflection. They operate simultaneously on many levels. They are physical places filled with water, plants, and animals. They are historical archives preserving traces of vanished worlds. They are ecological engines supporting life across vast regions. They are psychological landscapes that influence perception, curiosity, and imagination. And they are reminders that the natural world often achieves its greatest complexity not through spectacle, but through countless small interactions unfolding patiently across time. The swamp asks for little from those who enter it. It does not demand attention with dramatic peaks or sweeping vistas. Instead, it offers something quieter. It invites observation. It rewards patience. It reveals itself gradually, layer by layer, to anyone willing to look closely. In doing so, it teaches a lesson repeated throughout nature, that the deepest realities are often not the loudest or most obvious, but the ones hidden beneath the surface, waiting to be discovered by those who slow down long enough to notice them. To notice them requires a particular kind of attention, one that has become increasingly rare in a world built around speed. A swamp does not reveal itself quickly. The first impression may be little more than water, trees, and shadow, yet the longer one remains, the more the landscape seems to expand. Details emerge that were invisible moments earlier. Patterns begin connecting. Sounds separate into distinct voices. Movements appear within what initially seemed motionless. This gradual unfolding resembles the experience of reading a long and thoughtful book. The opening pages establish a setting, but the deeper meaning emerges only through time and sustained engagement. Wetlands reward the same patience. They reveal complexity not through sudden revelation, but through accumulation. Accumulation is, in many ways, the central story of the swamp. Water accumulates in low places. Organic matter accumulates within soil. Knowledge accumulates through observation. Even the appearance of the landscape reflects countless small events layered across centuries. Every fallen leaf contributes a tiny amount of material. Every flood deposits another thin layer of sediment. Every generation of plants alters the conditions for those that follow. The resulting ecosystem appears whole and complete, yet it is actually the product of innumerable contributions, each individually modest but collectively transformative. This principle extends beyond ecology. Many of the most significant changes in the world occur not through single dramatic events, but through gradual accumulation. The atmosphere of a swamp often encourages awareness of such processes because change unfolds at a pace that can actually be observed. Watch a floating leaf long enough, and its movement reveals subtle currents. Return to the same wetland across seasons and patterns begin to emerge. Visit over years and entirely new layers of understanding become possible. Scientists who dedicate careers to studying wetlands frequently describe a growing appreciation for complexity rather than a reduction of mystery. The more they learn, the more relationships they discover. A plant once considered ecologically unimportant may prove vital to certain insects. A microbial process may influence nutrient availability throughout the ecosystem. A slight variation in water depth may alter habitat suitability for numerous species. Understanding deepens not by simplifying the landscape, but by recognizing how intricately connected its parts truly are. Connection is everywhere within a swamp. The roots of trees influence water movement. Water movement affects soil chemistry. Soil chemistry shapes plant communities. Plant communities determine habitat availability. Habitat availability influences animal populations. Animal behavior affects seed dispersal, nutrient cycling, and countless other processes. The boundaries between causes and effects often blur because every component participates in ongoing feedback loops. Ecologists sometimes describe ecosystems as networks rather than collections. The distinction matters. A collection is simply a group of things occupying the same place. A network is a system of relationships. Swamps are networks in the deepest sense, woven together by exchanges of energy, matter, and information. Information, though often overlooked, plays a crucial role in the functioning of natural systems. Animals gather information about predators, food sources, and environmental conditions. Plants respond to changes in light, moisture, and chemical signals. Microorganisms react to shifts in temperature and nutrient availability. Every organism is, in some sense, continuously interpreting its surroundings. This perspective reveals the swamp as a place not only of biological activity, but of constant communication. Signals travel through sound, scent, vibration, chemistry, and movement. Messages are exchanged across scales ranging from microscopic interactions to continent-spanning migrations. A bird arriving at a wetland during migration carries information encoded within instinct, memory, and sensory systems refined through evolution. It recognizes suitable habitat, locates resources, and responds to environmental cues. Meanwhile, plants respond to seasonal signals carried by changes in temperature and daylight. Frogs begin calling when conditions favor reproduction. Insects emerge according to environmental triggers linked to moisture and warmth. The ecosystem operates as an immense conversation in which participants exchange information continuously without any central authority directing the process. The elegance of this arrangement becomes particularly apparent during periods of environmental stress. Drought, flood, storm, and temperature fluctuations all challenge the stability of the wetland. Yet the system responds through countless localized adjustments. Some species decline temporarily while others expand. Water pathways shift, nutrient flows change, organisms alter behavior. the response emerges collectively rather than through command. Such distributed resilience has fascinated scientists studying complex systems because it offers insights extending far beyond ecology. Similar principles appear in economies, social networks, and even technological systems. The swamp becomes a living example of how complexity can generate adaptability. Adaptability has always been essential in wetlands because change is inevitable. Floodwaters rise and recede, trees fall, channels form and disappear. New species arrive while others become less common. The ecosystem remains recognizable despite these transformations because change itself is part of its identity. There is a subtle philosophical lesson hidden within this reality. Humans often seek permanence, imagining stability as the absence of change. Nature suggests a different possibility. Stability may emerge not from resisting change but from integrating it. The swamp remains resilient precisely because it expects transformation and has evolved within it. By afternoon, sunlight once again reflects brightly from the water. Heat rises from exposed surfaces. Insects move through shafts of light beneath the canopy. A heron stands quietly along a shoreline, motionless except for the occasional adjustment of its gaze. Such scenes can appear timeless, yet every visible moment depends upon processes extending backward through history. The bird's behavior reflects evolutionary adaptations shaped across millions of years. The tree beside it grew through decades of seasonal cycles. The water beneath them follows pathways influenced by geological events far older still. Time exists in layers here. The present moment rests atop countless earlier moments that made it possible. This layered nature of reality often becomes easier to appreciate in places where human influence feels less dominant. Wetlands remind observers that life existed long before modern civilization and will continue adapting long after current circumstances have changed. Such awareness can be strangely comforting. It expands perspective. Personal concerns remain real, yet they become part of a larger story rather than the entirety of it. The swamp offers this perspective gently, without demanding any particular conclusion. It simply exists as evidence of continuity, adaptation, and connection. As afternoon begins its gradual transition toward evening, shadows lengthen once more across the water. Reflections grow deeper. The cycle that began before dawn moves steadily onward. Birds adjust their activity, light changes angle, temperatures slowly decline. The ecosystem prepares for another shift from day toward night. Nothing about the transition is rushed. It unfolds according to rhythms refined across ages. Watching it happen, one begins to understand why wetlands can feel simultaneously ancient and alive. They are not frozen remnants of the past. They are active participants in the present, carrying history forward while continuously creating something new. And so the swamp continues its quiet work, filtering water, storing carbon, supporting life, preserving memory, and weaving together relationships that span scales from the microscopic to the planetary. Every ripple, every root, every hidden movement contributes to a story still unfolding. The listener who remains long enough discovers that the greatest mystery of the swamp is not what lies concealed within it, but how so much complexity can exist beneath an appearance of such profound calm. That calm is perhaps the swamp's most convincing illusion. To stand at the edge of a quiet wetland during the late afternoon is to witness a scene that appears almost motionless. The water may seem still enough to function as a mirror. Trees stand rooted in place. Reeds sway only slightly in the breeze. Yet beneath this apparent tranquility, movement is constant. Water seeps through soil. Nutrients travel through roots. Fish navigate submerged pathways. Insects emerge, reproduce, and disappear. Microorganisms divide by the millions. Energy flows continuously from sunlight into living systems and then outward through intricate ecological networks. The swamp demonstrates a truth that extends far beyond nature itself. Stillness and activity are not opposites. Sometimes the most dynamic systems are precisely those that appear calm from a distance. This hidden activity becomes especially apparent when considering the sheer quantity of life supported by wetlands. Even a relatively small swamp may contain thousands of species interacting simultaneously. Some occupy the canopy high above the water, others inhabit submerged roots, muddy sediments, or floating vegetation. Many remain unseen during daylight and emerge only at night. The diversity is not random. Every species occupies a niche shaped by evolution and environmental conditions. Different organisms utilize different resources, operate at different times, and exploit different opportunities. The resulting complexity resembles a vast living tapestry in which each thread contributes to the integrity of the whole. Remove enough threads, and the pattern begins to weaken. Preserve them, and the structure endures. The concept of biodiversity is often discussed in terms of numbers, but numbers alone fail to capture its significance. Diversity is valuable not merely because many species exist, but because each species represents a unique solution to the challenges of survival. Every organism embodies information accumulated across countless generations. A turtle navigating murky water, a dragonfly hunting in midair, a frog responding to seasonal rains, each reflects evolutionary innovations refined through deep time. Wetlands serve as repositories for this biological creativity. They preserve not only life itself, but the extraordinary variety of forms through which life expresses itself. Creativity in nature operates differently than creativity in human culture. It has no designer, no blueprint, and no final goal. Instead, variation emerges continuously, and environmental conditions determine which traits persist. Over immense spans of time, this process generates remarkable outcomes. Consider the roots of swamp trees. Some spread outward through saturated soil, others develop structures capable of functioning in oxygen-poor environments. Certain species thrive where periodic flooding would kill most plants. These adaptations may appear purposeful, yet they emerged gradually through countless generations responding to environmental pressures. The swamp is therefore not only an ecosystem, but a living archive of evolutionary problem-solving. As scientists have learned more about these adaptations, they have increasingly looked to wetlands for inspiration. Engineers study natural water filtration systems. Architects examine efficient structural designs found in roots and branching patterns. Researchers investigate biological processes that may lead to new technologies or medical discoveries. This approach, often called biomimicry, reflects a growing recognition that nature has spent millions of years testing solutions to complex challenges. Wetlands, with their extraordinary diversity and resilience, contain a wealth of such solutions waiting to be understood. Yet, despite their sophistication, swamps remain vulnerable. Complexity does not guarantee invulnerability. Changes in water flow, pollution, habitat fragmentation, and climate conditions can all affect wetland ecosystems. Because so many processes are interconnected, disturbances may produce consequences that spread far beyond their original source. A change in water quality influences plants. Changes in plant communities affect animals. Altered animal populations impact nutrient cycles and ecological interactions. Understanding these relationships has become one of the central challenges of modern conservation science. Protecting wetlands requires recognizing not only individual species, but the networks connecting them. Networks are often easier to appreciate when they fail than when they function smoothly. In healthy ecosystems, many processes occur so effectively that they escape attention. Water is filtered naturally. Floods are moderated. Habitats support diverse populations. These benefits become most visible when they diminish. Human societies have repeatedly discovered this lesson after altering wetlands and observing unexpected consequences. Areas once protected from flooding become more vulnerable. Water quality declines. Wildlife populations decrease. Such experiences have gradually reshaped attitudes toward wetlands, encouraging a shift from viewing them as obstacles to recognizing them as essential components of environmental stability. This shift in perception mirrors a broader pattern in the history of knowledge. Many important discoveries involve learning to value what was previously overlooked. Microorganisms were invisible until microscopes revealed them. Deep oceans remained mysterious until technology allowed exploration. Wetlands were misunderstood until careful observation exposed their ecological significance. The process repeats throughout science. Reality often proves richer and more interconnected than initial assumptions suggest. Curiosity expands understanding by challenging appearances. Few places reward that curiosity more generously than a swamp. Spend enough time within one, and familiar categories begin to soften. Water becomes habitat, archive, and pathway simultaneously. Trees become living organisms, historical records, and ecological engineers. Mud becomes both soil and memory, preserving traces of events stretching back through centuries. Even silence transforms into something more complex, a backdrop against which countless subtle sounds gain meaning. The landscape encourages a form of observation that notices relationships rather than isolated objects. As evening approaches once more, the quality of light begins to change. Golden reflections spread across open water. Shadows lengthen beneath branches. The day slowly prepares to surrender itself to night. A bird crosses the wetland, its reflection briefly accompanying it across the surface below. Ripples expand outward from a fish disturbing the water. Somewhere in the distance, the first calls of evening begin to emerge. These events may seem ordinary, yet each connects to larger cycles. The bird participates in migration routes shaped by geography and evolution. The fish responds to environmental cues linked to temperature and light. The calls announce behaviors repeated across generations. Every moment contains echoes of broader patterns. Patterns themselves are among the most powerful tools for understanding nature. Scientists search for them in data. Animals respond to them instinctively. Human minds are naturally drawn toward them. Wetlands abound with patterns: seasonal flooding, migratory arrivals, daily transitions between darkness and light, cycles of growth and decay. Recognizing these rhythms transforms the swamp from a collection of observations into a coherent story. Individual details gain meaning through their relationships to larger processes. Perhaps that is why wetlands can feel so deeply satisfying to explore. They offer both detail and context. A single leaf floating on the water can inspire curiosity about currents, decomposition, and nutrient cycles. A flock of birds can lead to questions about migration, navigation, and climate. Every observation opens pathways toward broader understanding. The swamp becomes an invitation to think not only about what is visible, but about the systems connecting visible things together. Now the sun sinks lower still. The air cools slightly. Reflections deepen. Daylight withdraws from the water as another evening begins its slow arrival. The ecosystem prepares once again for the transformation that accompanies darkness. Nocturnal voices will soon replace daytime sounds. Hidden creatures will emerge. Stars will return to the mirrored surface of the water. And through it all, the swamp will continue its patient work, weaving together life, water, energy, and time in patterns so intricate that even after centuries of study they remain a source of endless fascination and quiet wonder. As the last light fades from the horizon, the swamp enters one of its most atmospheric hours. The world has not yet become fully dark, but daylight no longer dominates. Shapes soften at their edges, colors retreat into shadow. The surface of the water begins reflecting the sky more strongly than the landscape around it, creating the impression that the wetland is slowly dissolving into darkness. This is the hour when certainty becomes less reliable. Distances seem greater than they are. Sounds appear closer or farther away depending on the movement of air and water. Familiar features take on unfamiliar appearances. Such moments have fascinated human beings for thousands of years because they occupy the threshold between what is known and what is unknown. Psychologists often note that the human brain evolved to pay special attention during periods of uncertainty. When information becomes incomplete, the mind naturally becomes more alert, searching for patterns and explanations. A rustle in the reeds could be caused by wind, a bird, or some larger creature moving through vegetation. A ripple crossing the water may originate from a fish, an insect, or something unseen beneath the surface. In everyday life, uncertainty is often experienced as something uncomfortable. Yet in nature, uncertainty can also become a source of fascination. The swamp demonstrates this beautifully. It invites curiosity without necessarily providing immediate answers. Its mysteries are rarely dramatic. Instead, they emerge through suggestion, possibility, and gradual discovery. This quality helps explain why wetlands have occupied such a prominent place in literature, folklore, and storytelling throughout history. Writers and storytellers are often drawn to environments that embody transformation. Forests, mountains, deserts, and oceans all possess symbolic power because they represent journeys beyond ordinary experience. Swamps belong to this tradition, yet they do so in a uniquely subtle way. They are not defined by extremes of height, distance, or scale. Their power comes from ambiguity. They blur distinctions between land and water, permanence and change, visibility and concealment. In stories, such places naturally become settings where transformations occur and hidden truths are revealed. Interestingly, modern ecology has shown that this symbolic association is not entirely metaphorical. Wetlands truly are places of transformation. Organic matter becomes soil. Nutrients cycle through countless forms of life. Water changes pathways. Habitats evolve. Species adapt. Nothing remains entirely fixed. Every element participates in ongoing processes of change. The swamp therefore embodies transformation not merely in imagination, but in physical reality. It is a landscape where the boundaries between endings and beginnings often disappear. Consider a fallen tree lying partially submerged in dark water. At first glance, it may appear lifeless, a remnant of something that has reached its conclusion. Yet closer observation reveals another story. Insects colonize the wood. Fungi begin breaking down its fibers. Mosses establish themselves on exposed surfaces. Fish seek shelter beneath it. Birds perch upon it while hunting. Over time, the tree becomes less an object and more a community. Its decline creates opportunities for countless other forms of life. The apparent ending becomes a beginning. Such transformations occur continuously throughout the swamp, illustrating one of ecology's most important lessons. In nature, death and life are often inseparable parts of the same process. This lesson extends even to the water itself. The dark color of many swamp waters results from substances released during decomposition. Leaves fall, break down, and gradually enrich the environment. The very appearance that once inspired myths of mystery and danger emerges from biological processes essential to ecosystem health. What seems ominous from a distance is often evidence of renewal occurring beneath the surface. This reversal of expectations appears repeatedly within wetlands. Features once interpreted negatively frequently prove beneficial when understood more deeply. The history of scientific exploration contains many such reversals. Early observers often viewed swamps as unhealthy places, associating them with disease, difficulty, and isolation. To be fair, wetlands could indeed present challenges, particularly before advances in medicine and environmental understanding. Yet as research expanded, a different picture emerged. Scientists discovered ecosystems of extraordinary productivity and importance. Wetlands were revealed as nurseries for wildlife, regulators of water systems, reservoirs of biodiversity, and archives of environmental history. The transformation in perception did not occur because the wetlands changed. It occurred because understanding changed. Understanding itself is a fascinating process. It rarely arrives all at once. More often, it develops gradually through observation, comparison, and reflection. The swamp provides an ideal setting for appreciating this reality because it rewards patience. Many of its most interesting features reveal themselves only after extended attention. A visitor may initially notice only trees and water. With time, patterns become visible. Different bird calls can be distinguished. Variations in vegetation begin to make sense. Signs of animal activity emerge. The ecosystem unfolds layer by layer, much as knowledge itself unfolds. Meanwhile, night continues deepening across the wetland. The stars become brighter overhead. Reflections multiply upon the water's surface. In certain places, the distinction between sky and water grows surprisingly difficult to maintain. A star appears above and below simultaneously. A floating leaf drifts across a reflection of a distant constellation. The scene creates a strange visual harmony between the enormous scale of the cosmos and the intimate scale of the wetland. Ancient light from distant stars reaches the earth, and settles upon waters shaped by local ecological processes. Vastness and immediacy coexist within a single view. Such moments encourage a broader perspective on the place of life within the universe. Every organism in the swamp depends ultimately upon energy originating from the sun. Plants capture sunlight, animals consume plants or other animals. Energy moves through food webs before dispersing back into the environment. The same physical laws governing stars also govern the chemistry of wetlands. Carbon atoms cycling through swamp soils may once have existed in ancient atmospheres. Water molecules flowing through roots may have traveled through clouds, oceans, glaciers, and rivers across immense spans of time. The ecosystem is local, yet it participates in processes that are planetary in scale. This interplay between local detail and global connection may be one of the swamp's most profound qualities. It reminds observers that no place truly exists in isolation. A wetland is shaped by rainfall patterns influenced by oceans, migratory birds connected to distant continents, atmospheric conditions link it to broader climate systems. Even the smallest pond participates in networks extending far beyond its visible boundaries. The swamp becomes a microcosm of a larger truth. Everything is connected through relationships that often remain hidden until careful observation reveals them. Hours pass. The night grows deeper. The sounds of frogs, insects, and unseen creatures continue their ancient conversations across water and reeds. Trees stand quietly beneath the stars, their roots anchored in soils built through centuries of accumulation. Beneath the surface, life continues in forms both visible and invisible. Nutrients cycle, water moves, organisms feed, grow, and reproduce. Nothing is still, despite the overwhelming appearance of calm, and so the swamp persists through another night, carrying forward patterns older than memory itself. It remains a place where science and mystery meet without contradiction, where every answer reveals new questions, and where the quietest landscapes often contain the richest stories. Beneath the darkness, beneath the reflections, beneath the layers of water and soil, the great ecological drama continues, unhurried, interconnected, and endlessly unfolding.